Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficent, this is Dr. Aisha Jamani, your course instructor for Master's Care for Children. In the last lecture, we have discussed the structure and function of the vision. We have discussed the normal movements of this area. In today's lecture, we will discuss what are the pathomechanics of the head vision. So, what will be the content of today's lecture? We will discuss for sure the pathomechanics, we define the pathomechanics, then we will discuss the causes of the hip pathomechanics and the resulting symptoms arising due to one pathomechanics in the patient. The objective of this lecture is to make you people aware of what are the pathomechanics and to explain the structure and functional causes of the hip pathomechanics that might disturb the function of the speaker. You are very well familiar of this figure of the diagram. You can see that this is the hip area representing the two hip bones, the bony sacrum and the coccyx, which form the pelvis. Superiorly, the pelvis articulates with the lumbar spine, and inferiorly, it articulates with the femur to form the acetabular-femoral or the hip joint. So, we will discuss what are the disturbed features which can cause the impaired function of the circuit. If we discuss the normal function or the normal characteristic of the hip joint, then we are very well familiar that hip joint is a weight-bearing joint of the lower extremity. It is the first joint in the series of the lower extremity, formed between the acetabulum of the pelvis and the head of femur. It is a concavo-convex joint, synovial variety, with volant socket type joint, maximum mobile joint in the lower extremity. As it is a weight-bearing joint, so its function is to provide the locomotion and ambulation and transfer the body weight from one area to another. It also serves to transfer the weight of the head, neck, arm and the torso from the hip down to the ground and to receive the ground forces, traction forces, and to provide move it upward towards the other area of the torso, including the spine. If any impairment disease occurs in the normal articular characteristic or feature of the joint, if there is an impairment, tightness, weakness in the muscles surrounding this joint, then there will be obviously change in the normal function of this joint, which cause the increased forces or the stress to the other joint and impairment of load transfer towards the other region, which might disturb the normal function of the other joint and cause the pain and decrease range of motion beside the hip towards those joints as well. So, how can we define the pathomechanics? Obviously, change in the normal biomechanical function of the joint, extremity or the torso resulting from the disease. The disease which cause the abnormal pathomechanics can be one of the three. It can be the asymmetrical alignment of the leg, which we can say that either leg length discrepancy may cause the impairment in the normal biomechanics of the hip area, decreased flexibility or muscular imbalances in the muscles surrounding the hip area can also impair the normal biomechanics. Any disturbed bony alignment, either congenital or the acquired, or any deformity in the surgeon can also cause the disturbed mechanics of the surgeon. Let's start one by one what are these causes and how they cause the impairment and how they contribute the impairment in the normal mechanics of the system. First cause is decreased flexibility. This is one of the major cause which is seen in day-to-day life of an individual. Whenever The flexibility is decreased in the structures surrounding the hip region. Obviously, the weight creating forces are not moved properly and are transferred towards the spine and are not being absorbed in the region such as the pelvic. Nature has provided the muscle with the four basic biomechanical properties. The first one is contractility, the next is excitability, the next comes the extensibility, and the fourth one is elasticity. Contractility is the ability of a muscle to produce the contraction or to shorten. It is of two types, concentric contraction and eccentric contraction. The muscle performs its function by its two contractile actions. The next is the excitability, which is the recruitment of the muscle for activation in response to the nerve signals provided by the brain or the nervous system. Extensibility is the ability of lengthening of the muscle when it is being stretched. Elasticity is the ability of the muscle to bounce back to its normal position after stretch or contraction has been applied to the muscle. So if any of this feature of the property is being disturbed, result in the decreased flexibility of the muscle surrounding an joint. Obviously, this can be one of the contributing factors towards the abnormal mechanics of the structure, and whenever a structure is being compromised with the normal mechanics, it can cause a cascade of impairment in the other structures as well, which can be the cause of pain, degeneration, as well as deformity and the other regions as well. First, starting from the structures or examples which can cause uh, the impaired or decreased uh, pathomechanics of the hip region. The muscle being tight or being lengthened depend upon the normal posture touching of the person or the normal occupation restraint imposed on the person. Depending upon the different circumstances, different occupation, different posture assumed of the person, different structures are being tight. The tightness of the muscle can be seen in relation to the different diseases such as the osteoarthritis or any other systematic or the joint or the bone related disease of the muscle of the area. If the hip extensor will be tight, then what will be the resulting features and how the tight hip extensor increase the load on the other area? Let's discuss. Tight hip extensors cause the increased lumbar flexion whenever the thigh is being flexed. We have discussed previously that the hip or the pelvis is being connected to the lumbar region as well as the lower extremity. Whenever there is a movement of the pelvis, there will be compensatory movements at the hip joint as well as the lumbar joint. And because a few muscles cross more than one joint, which are biarticular or multi-articular muscles, they also play an important role in tightness and causing or distributing the impairment from one area to another area. First of all, discuss what are the hip extensors crossing this area. Hip extensors which cross the hip joint can be categorized into two types. The first one is the primary muscles, and the second one is the accessory or the secondary muscles. One thing most important to consider that either these muscles are single joint crossing or the two joint or multiple joint crossing. So in the hip area, when the hip extensors are being concerned, the primary muscle of the hip extension is the gluteus maximus. It is a single joint crossing muscle which crosses only the hip joint, whereas the secondary and accessory muscles of the hip, and they are two joint crossing muscles as well, which includes the semitendinosus and the biceps tendons. Obviously, these three muscles combine to form the hamstring. Hamstring basically is a two joint crossing muscle. It crosses the hip as well as it cross the knee. So it means that with the presence of this muscle is this two joint crossing muscle, whenever there is tightness seen in this muscle, the poor mechanics of this muscle can cause the impairment in the hip as well as in the knee. And as hip or the pelvis is being associated to the lumbar spine, the impairment or decrease of abnormal movement can be seen in the pelvis as well. So let me describe you again. I have told you the tight hip extensors cause increased lumbar flexion when the thigh flexes. Here it is important to know the two joint crossing action of the muscle, as the hip extensors are two types. The one is the single joint crossing muscle and the other one is the two joint crossing muscle. It means that the tightness of any of the two muscles or two of these muscles can cause the abnormal movement at the lumbar spine. Obviously, the load is being shifted towards the lumbar spine and might cause the pain and decreased range of motion or abnormal movement in the suture. Here you can see that whenever the gluteus maximus is tight, gluteus maximus obviously is caused the movement of the posterior pelvic tilt resulting as suppose whenever there is posterior pelvic tilt, there will be compensatory flattening of the spine. So if only the gluteus maximus will be tight, there will be compensatory movement of the spine as well. If this muscle will be tight, there will be flattening of the spine. But if the gluteus maximus is tight in addition with the hamstring, then or if both the muscles are the tight, then obviously the manifestations or the symptoms can be seen in the knee as well. As the hamstring is a two joint crossing muscle, it causes the extension at the hip joint and it causes the flexion at the knee joint. So if the knee joint is being flexed, as the muscle is already tight, it will cause the contraction at the two areas when in an attempt to meet to cause the knee flexion, there will be associated posterior pelvic tilt and resulting in compensatory flattening in the lumbar spine. So hip extensors can cause tight hip extensors can cause the lumbar flattening, which is not a regular process. You can see over here, this is the normal movement. This and the muscles have a normal extensibility and the normal contractility, but in a condition when the muscles are being tight, they will be resulting load and the stress on the lumbar spine as well. Another example of poor pathomechanics or decreased extensibility or flexibility resulting in the poor pathomechanics of the hip region include the tight hip flexors. Whenever the hip flexors are being tight, they will cause the increased lumbar extension or lordosis as the thigh extends. Obviously, again, we can see that the movement or the problem at the one region can cause the abnormal movement in the other two areas as well. It again depends upon either the hip flexors are of one joint crossing muscle and the two joint crossing muscle. Let's see what are the hip flexors first. Hip flexors again are of two types: primary hip flexors and secondary hip flexors, and single joint crossing and the two joint crossing muscle. The primary and the single joint crossing hip flexors include the iliacus and the psoas major, which are collectively known as iliopsoas. Iliopsoas are being attached with the vertebrae, iliac bone or the hip bone, and are going to be attached on the femur, upper end of the femur. So they cross the hip area and they are not going to cross the knee joint. Whereas the accessory muscle at the hip joint causing the flexion includes the three muscles. The first one is the rectus femoris, which is a part of quadriceps. The second is the sartorius, which is the lateral muscles and cross anteriorly and going to be attached on the medially on the tibia. And the third one is the tensor fascia lata, which is the muscle on the lateral side of the leg. You can see that these are the muscles of the hip region which serves on the flexion. Psoas major, this is the iliacus, tensor fascia lata, rectus femoris, and the sartorius. So these muscles serve to flex the hip. It depends either which muscle is being tight and which muscle is being dominant on the other muscle. You can see in this diagram, this is the normal iliopsoas or the psoas major muscle, which is being attached on the vertebra, transverse process of the vertebra, and gonna be inserted in the lesser two tendon of the femur. If only this iliopsoas muscle will be tight, it will cause the increased arch or the extension at the lumbar spine. So, if the single joint crossing muscle, that is iliopsoas, being tightened, it will cause the increased lordosis at the lumbar spine. So, you can see that the impaired or decreased flexibility in an area can cause, in an area of the hip region, can increase the load and the stress on the other region, especially the spine. You can see over here, if the rectus femoris is also being taut, as it is a two-joint crossing muscle, is being attached on the anterior superior iliac spine and gonna be insert on the ligamentum patella. So, and then it means that this muscle will cause the movement, or the movement of this muscle will be associated with the movement at the knee joint and the movement of the hip joint. Rectus femoris is the extensor, is a part of the quadriceps and it is the extensor. So if an extension at the knee is being attempted, and if this muscle is already shortened, then in order to assume the active insufficiency, due to the active insufficiency, the shortened muscle will cause, or the tightened muscle will cause the anterior pelvic tilt. As the muscle is already tight, the muscle and an attempt to extend the knee is being done, which is the concentric action of this muscle at this area, and it is tight already. It will cause the anterior pelvic tilt and move the pelvis anteriorly. Whenever there will be anterior pelvic tilt or rotation of the pelvis anteriorly, there will be compensatory extension at the lumbar spine or increased lordosis. Obviously, when you extend your knee, whenever you are lying supine or you are assuming a standing posture, the tight rectus femoris can increase the lumbar stress by increasing the lumbar lordosis. You can see over here, this is the relaxed lumbar spinal curvature, and this is the increased lumbar curvature in case whenever there is a tightness in the hip flexors. Obviously, you can see over here, this is the neutral extended position at the knee, and in an attempt to make this extension position, there will be compensatory lordosis at the lumbar spine. So, decreased flexibility how contribute to the abnormal position of the movement and cause stress to the other region. Obviously, whenever the lumbar spine will be remain in the extended position, there will be tightness or shortening develop in the rectus spinal muscle. It may lead to the development of lower floor syndrome ultimately. So we have cleared that the tight hip flexors cause the increased lumbar extension as the thigh extends. It means that here they are talking about the two joint crossing muscles. When they extend the thigh, there will be increased lumbar extension. The same is true when for the single joint crossing muscle, but they, that is devoid of the thigh extension. The tight hip flexor, that is iliopsoas, the uh, can cause the increased lumbar extension. It doesn't depend on the movement of the knee. But whenever the rectus femoris is being tight, there will be associated movement of the knee and associated movement of the lumbar spine. Let's see if there will be contractures in any muscle. Normally, the hip contractures are usually developed in the hip flexors, and contracture basically is the adaptive shortening of the muscle due to the pain, poor posture, abnormal position, or the sustained sitting posture of any area or the trauma of the muscle as well. Contracture, when a contracture is being developed in a muscle, that contracture set the joint that in the motion corresponding to the contraction. It means that whenever there will be the contracture at the hip joint, the hip region will be set into the flexion, which is the normal function of the hip flexor. So whenever due to the contracture, the hip will be assume a flexion posture and is unable to perform the extension. Obviously, in an attempt to cause the extension by passive force, the person or the individual might feel stretch or the pain on the anterior thigh or the groin area. So, whenever the hip will be set into flexion, there will be compensatory movements at the other regions, other areas as well. Obviously, whenever there is hip flexion, produced by the rectus femoris or the iliopsoas due to their contracture. The opposite muscle, the antagonist muscle, obviously that is the gluteus maximus or the hamstring. Obviously, hamstrings will undergo, these two muscles will undergo lengthen as they are uh, they are continuously facing the hip flexion. As the hip is gonna be flexed, the opposite antagonist muscle assume a lengthened force because of this constant hip flexion posture. So whenever the hip flexion contracture will be developed, first of all, the joint cannot assume the normal extension force because of the tightness or shortening of the muscle. Opposite muscle, hamstring, will be lengthened at the hip region, and in order to maintain the normal length tension relationship, they will cause the hamstring can cause the contraction at the knee joint. So there will be compensatory flexion at the knee joint. This is the consequence of the hip flexion contracture, that the hamstring has to maintain its normal length tension relationship because it is being tight or stretched at the hip joint or is being lengthened at the hip joint. So it has to maintain the flexion or it has to maintain the concentric contraction in the other joint on, obviously that is the knee joint because it crossed the knee joint as well. So it will set the knee joint into flexion in order to maintain in its normal length tension relationship. So in an attempt in an individual with hip flexion contracture, there will be resulting knee flexion as well. This movement will cause stress on the knee joint and obviously ultimately cause the tightness in the or insufficiency in the hamstring as well. If a person want or if a person assume a weight bearing position or started walking and moving, obviously one has to move. So if we start moving with this hip flexion contracture and as well as slight bending at the knee joint, then the pressure is being imposed on the hip as well as the knee in an attempt to cause the extension at the hip. As in this position the joint is not locked. The knee, if the knee remains flexed, then the joint means that the joint is not locked. One has if one has to lock the knee joint, he or she has to assume a erect standing posture. In order to assume the locking of the knee joint, the there will be tightness being seen in the pelvis, and the pelvis will move posteriorly by the tight action of by the tightness or the concentric action of the hamstring, and there will be posterior shifting of the pelvis, resulting in the increased lordosis at the lumbar spine. So, the hip flexion contracture ultimately cause the disturbances in other two areas, including the knee as well as the lumbar spine, depending upon the contractures are being set into which muscles, and for sure, whenever which muscle is being contracted, the effect will be produced in the surrounding muscle as well. In this case, obviously, if the hamstrings are being compromised, the anterior knee pain can be developed or the knee degeneration can be developed because the knee joint is not being blocked and weight is being shifted in any of the part of the knee joint or tibiofemoral joint, as the load is not equally shifted on the entire tibial tattoo. So this condition can cause the degenerative disorder in the hip as well as in the lumbar spine as well. Besides the imbalance in the muscle, they can cause disturbances in the normal structure of the muscle of the joint as well. Now comes the tight hip abductors. Hip abductors can be tight with the poor posture, which include prolonged shifting of the weight on one extremity or due to the leg length discrepancy. If there is leg length discrepancy of an individual assume a posture in which the weight is being shifted on the one leg as well, only one leg, then obviously the tightness can be seen, or if there is a strain, rectus strain, then might possible there will be tightness in the hip adductors. Here, one thing must be revised or mentioned that we have studied that frontal plane movement of the pelvis result in the opposite movement at the two pelvis. It means that whenever you are standing on the single leg or shifting weight on a single hip, there will be two opposite movements. On the side of the pelvis that is being elevated, there will be hip hiking and there will be adduction at the hip region, and the other side which is being where the pelvis is being dropped, there will be hip abduction. So the frontal plane movement at the hip joint, which is known as hip hiking and hip dropping or the pelvis dropping, there will be opposite movement at the both hip joint. The side of the hip that is being elevated, there will be adduction at the hip joint, and the other side there will be abduction at the hip joint. So if in an individual where there is tight adduction, where the adductors are being tight, there will be elevation seen in that area. You can see over here the hip adductors are being tight. Obviously, adductors include the adductor brevis, magnus, and longus. So mainly the adductor magnus is a two joint crossing muscle. However, the brevis and adductor longus are the single joint crossing muscle. So in order to see the effects at the knee joint, if you see the effects in the knee joint as well, it means that the adductor magnus is also being involved. If the symptoms are only present at the hip or the territory of the hip, it means that adductor brevis and the adductor longus are being tight. Anyhow, whenever the adductors are being tight, it will cause the dropping of pelvis on the contralateral side and elevation of the pelvis on the same side. In order to assume the balance, the trunk will shift towards that side where the adductors are being shortened. It means that convexity of the spine is being seen on that side that is dropped, and concavity is seen on that side where the pelvis is being elevated. So, in an individual where the hip adductors are tight, the pelvis will, the trunk will bend towards the tight hip adductors, and lateral and abnormal lateral movement or the lateral shifting of the trunk may cause the structural or functional scoliosis in an individual. So these are the examples of the decreased extensibility which impair the proper mechanics of the hip area and contribute to the abnormal weight bearing and as well as um, abnormal shifting of the body weight and may cause pain and restricted motions. Now comes the second more obvious cause which is seen in the individual, which is known as asymmetrical leg length. Asymmetrical leg length means that one leg is being lengthened and the other leg is shortened. So whenever there is leg length discrepancy, it may affect the structural and functional relationship of the pelvis. And the abnormal forces are being shifted towards the spine, head, neck, and arms, and abnormal forces are being distributed down towards the leg. So, if obviously asymmetrical leg length, seen that unilateral leg shortened or unilateral long leg. A unilateral short leg causes lateral pelvic tilt. Obviously, if the leg of one sided is shortened, it will cause the pelvis to drop or to elevated on one side. So the pelvis drop on the shortened side, and the side bending will be seen away from the side of the shortened. Let me give you an example. If this leg is being shortened, it means that in this area the pelvis will be low or drop, and this area the pelvis will be high. In that condition, you will observe the bending of the trunk towards the side that is being elevated in an attempt to lift this area. When you bend your trunk towards the elevated side, this is an attempt to elevate the side that is being dropped. So the trunk shifting will make you enable that which side is being shortened and which side is being lengthened. Obviously, the individual will bend towards the side that is lengthened, and there will be compensatory side bending towards the lengthened side in order to elevate that side that is being shortened. And this kind of condition obviously causes the structural and functional scoliosis. First of all, there will be abnormal length tension relationship of the spine. Obviously, you can see that the muscle on the side where the side bend, the muscle will side bend, the quadratus lumborum will be shortened on that side, and there will be lengthening of the quadratus lumborum because there will be the connectivity. It might cause the development of S-shaped scoliosis or the C-shaped scoliosis, but obviously due to the shifting of the trunk towards the side of the lengthened extremity, there are chances to develop the structural and functional scoliosis in an individual. What are the causes of unilateral short leg? We have discussed that if the length of one leg is short and the length of other leg is long. So, what are the causes behind that? Why there is leg length discrepancy? If an individual has a flat foot, if there is new valgum, coxa vara, tight hip muscles, obviously the adductors or abductors, or anterior to rotate hip bone, poor standing posture, or asymmetrical growth in the leg, either femur or either tibia. The femur develop asymmetrically towards the other bone, or the tibia develop asymmetrical toward the other bone. So these are the causes where unilateral short leg can be seen, besides the other causes such as the polio and so on. Coxa vara and coxa valga are the congenital problems of the hip joint in which the neck shaft angle or the angle of inclination is being disturbed. Normally, the neck shaft angle, which is the angle between the line passing through the head and neck of the femur, and the second line passing to the longitudinal axis of the femur, and the angle is around 125 to 30 degrees. If the angle is less than 125 degree, the condition is known as Coxa-Vara, and if the angle is greater than 125 or 130 degree, the condition is known as Coxa-Vara. You can see over here, this is the central femur with exact uh, boundary is the normal neck shaft angle or inclination. You can see if the neck shaft angle is low, the distal end of the femur will move anteriorly, will move medially. Whenever a bone will move towards the midline of the body, the condition is known as Vara. So if the femur moves medially towards the midline of the body, that condition is known as Coxa Vara. Coxa means hip. And the other condition, Coxa Valga, you can see over here, this is the normal uh, head and neck, and if the coxa valga will be seen, neck shaft angle will be greater than 125 or 130 degree. The lower end of the femur will move laterally. This is the normal inclination, and it will move lateral to this normal inclination. So if the femur will move away from the midline, or if the bone will move away from the midline, that condition is known as valga. In this case, this is known as coxa valga. So whenever there will be congenital malalignment of the bone, there you can see that there will be leg length discrepancy. And other, now you can see that whenever there will be a coxa valga or vera, how it will contribute to the leg length discrepancy. You can see over here, this is the coxa vera, in which the femur is more medial. In order to have an intact knee joint, the femur will have to move outward so that the weight is tried to be shift towards normal, towards the base of support. The femur will move, tibia will move laterally. When the tibia will move laterally, this condition is known as genu valgum. So you can see over here, there will be genu valgum. The coxa vara with resulting genu valgum is associated with the shorter leg. So this side of the leg will be shorter if there will be coxa vara. If there is a coxa vara, there will be resulting accompanying compensatory genu valgum, and that side of the leg will be considered or apparently shorter. The pelvis of that side will be dropped, and the pelvis of other side will be elevated, and the trunk will move or bend towards the elevated side in order to attempt to uplift the leg of this side. Now comes another congenital problem. It may be acquired, but mainly it is seen that is a congenital problem, which is the angle of anteversion or angle of retroversion. We have discussed previously that there is an angle between the head and neck of the femur and the condyles of the femur when seen on the superior aspect. If the angle is normal angle is around 15 degree, if the angle is greater than 15 degree, the condition is known as anteversion. When there will be anteversion, the femoral condyles will move medially, rotated medially. If the angle is less than 15 degree, the condyles of the femur will move laterally, and this condition is known as retroversion. So, retroversion again affect the length of the muscle. Whenever there will be anteversion, the condyles will move medially. In order to compensate, the tibia moves laterally. Tibia will rotate laterally, and this condition is known as genu valgum. And auto-towing can be seen and the best planners can be the compensatory movement. Unilateral anteversion result in the shorter leg on that side. So you can see that this is the side where the anteversion is being seen. The condyles of the femur are more medially, and in order to compensate, the tibia will move laterally, and they will be out toeing. Toe will be move outward, and the you can see that they will be feet flat. They will be feet flat. Can be seen in order to compensate the normal relationship of the lower extremity. So the side where the anteversion is being seen, they will be short leg. Observe again the pelvis will be drop on that side and elevate on the upper side, and in order to make the leg look or function normal, the pelvis sorry, the trunk will move towards the elevated side or bend towards the elevated side in an attempt to push or lift the shortened side. There will be increased load on the lumbar spine, resulting scoliosis, which can be S-shaped or which can be C-shaped. Whenever there will be scoliosis resulting in the imbalance of the muscle surrounding the lateral aspect of the spine, obviously, firstly there will be the functional scoliosis, which ultimately, if uncorrected or untreated, will lead to the structural scoliosis. So these are the causes of um, disturbed or length tension relationship. We have seen that Coxa vara and valga and anteversion and retroversion can affect the length of the muscle and resulting abnormal shift of the forces towards the lower extremity as well and towards the spine. You have seen that there will be genu varum or genu valgum respective to the coxa vara and valga. There will be genu varum or valgum respective to the anteversion and retroversion. Whenever there will be the anteversion, there will be the genu valgum, and whenever there will be retroversion, there will be the genu varum, and resulting outward towing and into towing, flat foot or arch foot. So the abnormal structural relationship at the hip joint not only affect the lower extremity but also affect the spine as well. This is how the disturbed structural and functional relationship in one region can affect the structure and function of the other region as well. Now comes the normal. Now comes the hip muscle imbalances and their effect. It is seen that one structure is dominant on the other structure. Whenever it being tight, whenever it's being weak, whenever it undergo contraction, whenever it's being in pain or restricted motion. Obviously, muscle functions through habits. So whenever the habits are poor, whenever the bad habits are being assumed, the poor posture are being executed or experienced, there will be the imbalances seen in the muscle. And in that condition, one muscle override the other muscle and resulting cascade of imbalances either in length or either in the strength of the muscle can be seen, and again disturbed relationship and pain and increased stress being transferred up and down to the region. Overuse syndrome, soft tissue stress, and the joint pain develop in response to these abnormal stresses. Obviously, whenever the imbalance is being there, they will, and it is gonna be assumed for a prolonged period of time. It will stress the joint, it will stress the soft tissue, and it will affect the normal length tension relationship and normal function of the area. Here are some examples of the hip muscle imbalances and their effect. It has been seen that IT bands or iliotibial band and tensor fascia lata override the gluteus maximus. Whenever there will be shortened IT band and the shortened tensor fascia lata, they will override the function of gluteus maximus. It is seen in the slouched posture whenever you uh, stand in a position the pelvis moves outward or bulge outward, or In the relaxed standing posture, it has been seen that there will be the shortening of IT band and the tensor fascia. It is usually seen that the two joint crossing hip muscles are dominant over the iliopsoas. I have just shown you that the tight iliopsoas can only cause the disturbed relationship with the lumbar spine or increased lordotic curve at the lumbar spine. But it is usually seen that if the hip flexors, which are two joint crossing muscles, are tight, they will override the action of the iliopsoas. They will be the compensatory movement at the hip knee joint, or whenever the knee joint is made into action, then they will be changed in the position or the curve of the lumbar spine. It is also seen that we have discussed that besides tensor fascial lata and IT band is dominant over the gluteus maximus, it is seen that tensor fascial lata is also dominant over the gluteus medius. Obviously, gluteus medius and minimus are the abductor muscles, and so on with the tensor fascial lata. So, the dominant or tightness of the TFL may impair the lateral knee pain and cause the stress on this knee pain as well as on the medial side of the knee as well. Hamstring are dominant over the gluteus maximus. First of all, when the gluteus maximus is being shortened, they will decrease the range of hip flexion, and they will be the compensatory lumbar flexion, spinal lumbar or the spinal flexion, whenever the thigh is being flexed. Whenever the gluteus maximus is being tight, there will be resulting IT band tightness and TFL tightness is being seen. It means that whenever a patient has a short or the tight gluteus maximus, it will be associated with the lateral side knee pain with relation to the IT and TFL. Whenever there will be the tightness at the gluteus maximus, the pressure will be imposed on the hamstring, and the overuse of the hamstring can cause the decreased flexibility of the hamstring, and hamstring has to maintain the normal length and relationship, and it has to work at both the joint, the hip as well as the knee. So whenever the tightness can be will be seen in the hamstring, there will be flexion at the knee as well, and it will cause the unlocking position and strain on the anterior aspect of the knee as well. Obviously, we have seen previously that hip adductors can be tight as well as there will be tightness of the hip abductors as well. Whenever there will be tightness of the hip abductors, obviously the pelvis will be moved towards the side of to the opposite side, and there will be seen that tightness can be seen in the lateral pelvic trunk. Let me explain you by this diagram. I have just told you this is the side with the adductors being tight. If the adductors are being tight, the pelvis will be elevated on that side. Similarly, if the adductors are being tight, the pelvis obviously will drop to the other side, and the bending of the trunk can be seen. So, with the tightness in the adductor, there will be resulting increased stress on the or an excessive trunk motion can be seen, and resulting imbalance in the trunk musculature, especially the quadratus lumborum, can be seen. This is about the faulty pathomechanics of the hip region. If you find any query or any problem in this lecture, we will discuss. We will make sure that we will arrange an integrated lecture, and we will discuss your queries and the problems. Besides, you can write your query or difficulties in the comment section in the Google Classroom, so that we can fix your problems or the make solution of your problem. Thank you so much.